I guess I'll say a couple of words. I did put in the agenda there that I would have a couple of words. So, first of all, I do say thank you to Councilman Wynn for standing up for the things that we conservatives hold dear, and that is just getting back down to the basics of things. This country was founded upon Christian belief, and for him to stand up there and pray, even though we had people say that they don't need his prayer. Just for him to be a good role model like that, I appreciate that, and I thank you. I do have this verse real quick I want to share, and that's coming from Hosea, the 4th chapter, verse 6. And it says, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. Thou shalt be no more priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children." Knowledge. You know, within this last 4 years, we had someone, or the last, it's almost 4 years, in the office up there in Annapolis that I don't think he has any knowledge of what he's doing. To be honest with you, we were in surplus, now we're in a deficit, and Maryland has suffered. And there's been things that has went through across his desk, that's sickening. Truly is. And it's time to get back to loving family, keeping the family together, and let's get Maryland back on track. So without any more ado, let's welcome John Meyer.
David, thank you for that warm introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Myrick, and with your help, I will be the next governor of the state of Maryland. A little about me. First off, I am not a politician. I loathe politicians, quite frankly. I have very little use for them. And the difference there is stark. Politicians are people that sit in elected office and they talk about problems. Public servants are the people that solve problems. I'm a public servant. I have spent my entire adult life in the service of this country and this state. My family's been here in Maryland since 1640, so Maryland is home. I've lived all over the world. When I had the opportunity to come back here, we came home. I raised my family here. My daughter and granddaughter live in Anne Arundel County. My brother lives in the same house we grew up in Hartford County, where he raised his family. I started out my professional career as the deputy sheriff in Hartford County, protecting Marylanders in your homes at night when you're most vulnerable. I then spent 30 years as a federal counterintelligence and intelligence agent for a variety of different federal agencies. So I protected you in places that you don't even know of and can't even imagine. While I was doing that, I served 23 years in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. I flew for 10 of that out of Dover Air Force Base up in Delaware. I'm a combat decorated veteran. I've served in combat on 5 different continents. So I protected you far away from your homes as well. Why am I doing this? Because like most of you sitting here, I am absolutely fed up with the direction that the state has headed. And I don't just blame the current governor, I blame previous governors as well, quite frankly, because they've let it get this way. Maryland did not get this messed up overnight. Okay? It's been a series of decades, quite frankly. But in the past 3 years, we have seen a governor who doesn't care about Maryland, who is not a Marylander, a guy who claims he's a Marylander, but left Maryland when he was 4 years old and was raised in New York. A guy who claims the Maryland public education system is one of the best in the country, yet sends his children to private school in Baltimore City, and who himself attended private schools in Pennsylvania. He's never stepped foot in a Maryland public school. I'm a product of the Hartford County public school system. I got a halfway decent education, I think. I can read. I can do that. Jake. It's time for Maryland to have a Marylander who cares about the state and run the state for us. The bottom line here is this governor has run us into the ground and is continuing to run us there and did with both hands. He entered office in 2023 with a $5.5 billion surplus. In just 2 years, he ran us into a $3.5 billion deficit. And even the comptroller of the state of Maryland, when I asked her to her face a month and a half ago where our money went, told me she couldn't tell me because she didn't know. Like, really? Aren't you the chief financial officer of the state? Isn't your name on the checks? And you can't tell me where $9 billion taxpayer dollars went. I see that as a problem. So we did some digging. We do know where some of your money went. And remember, that's your money. Something that they forgot over in Annapolis a long time ago. They're not spending monopoly money. They're not spending their own money. They are spending your hard-earned dollars. We know this governor hired 5,000 new state employees in his first year in office. Folks, that equals $500 million in salaries alone. $500 million. We do know that last year, or actually 23, 2 state agencies overspent their budgets by $250 million apiece due to accounting errors. Accounting errors. When the governor found out about that, he should have taken some action. Instead, he did not request an audit to find out where $500 million of your tax money went. And more importantly, he didn't fire one human being. So those people who committed accounting errors are still sitting in those jobs. Now, I ran multi-billion-dollar programs for the federal government. And if one of my budget people would have walked into my office and said, "Hey, boss, got a slight problem. We overspent by before you got billion out," I'd have fired them and had them escorted from the building. It's your money. We have a right to know where it went. We do know that last year, the state of Maryland spent $2.9 billion of your tax dollars providing services to illegal aliens. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't remember voting for that. Any of you vote for that? Hands? Yes. So there's nearly $4 billion of your money right there. Now, that doesn't account for the other $5.5 billion that we still can't seem to find, but that's $4 billion. So how did they respond to the fiscal crisis? They raised our taxes by the largest tax increase in Maryland history. And most people are like, Maryland, Maryland history, yeah, okay. No, that's 250 years, folks. We're not a new state, remember, we're one of the first ones. $1.87 billion in new taxes and fees. Any of you go to motor vehicles to try to renew your tags lately? There you go. Maryland now pays the 4th highest vehicle registration fees in the country. And states that you would expect to be more than us, like New York and California, they pay less. Illinois is the only big state that actually spends more on vehicle registrations now than Maryland. Gasoline tax. We pay the 2nd highest gasoline tax in the nation. 70 cents of every gallon you pump is taxes. Taxes. Now, for the money we're spending on that, our roads ought to be paved in gold. In my neighborhood, and I live in Prince George's County now, unfortunately, we have potholes that will swallow an SUV. So, where's our money going? Good question, right? They allegedly cut $2 billion out of the state budget last year to balance it out. They didn't cut a thing. I think the councilman will understand this. All they did was transfer a lot of that responsibility and that money down to the states and the cities. Things like this teacher's pension plan. 2 years ago, the state paid 70%, the counties paid 30%. This year, the counties will pay 70%, and the state will pay 30%. piggyback tax for your income tax. 50% of your state income tax is supposed to come back to the counties. This year, it's gonna be 30%. They kept 20% of your money to fill their hole. And have the counties have to respond to this? The only way they can, because they still have to provide us services. The only way they can do that is property taxes. Now, in Prince George's County, they didn't raise my property tax. What they did was they raised my tax assessment. So my house is now worth $40,000 more than it was last year. When I opened that tax bill, I had to take a nitroglycerin tablet. It was ridiculous. We can do better. You deserve better. You deserve to know where your money's going. I've been a proponent for a line-by-line accounting of state and federal budgets long before there was a DOGE, long before Donald Trump even thought about running for office. I've worked for the federal government for 30 years. I've seen fraud, waste, and abuse at a galactic scale. I know it happens in the state of Maryland as well. We will bring in on my first day in office an accounting firm from outside, be that Deloitte, Ernst & Young, someone who has no ties to Maryland state government. And we will find where our tax money is going in every state agency. And where there is waste, we will cut that waste. Where there is fraud, we will prosecute the offenders, because no one steals your money on my block. We're going to implement a couple other bills that we're going to jam through the legislature to help alleviate some of the burden on our seniors in the state of Maryland, because going across the state, I hear everywhere, I can't afford to retire here in Maryland. And that breaks my heart, quite frankly, as a Marylander. So we are going to propose a bill to make all retirement income in the state of Maryland state income tax exempt. Because you should not get penalized for living long enough to retire in Maryland. We're also going to propose that Maryland state property taxes be eliminated for any homeowner over the age of 65. Because you should not have to make a choice between paying your ridiculous electric bill now or paying your property taxes. How are we going to do this with a Democrat supermajority legislature? Common sense. And quite frankly, embarrassment if we have to. The governor's office is a very powerful office here in the state of Maryland. Most people don't realize that. Our legislature, as you well know, only meets 90 days a year. The other 9 months of the year, the governor runs this state by executive decree. So he has a great deal of power. He also has a bank of TV cameras and microphones right outside of his office. And anytime he'd like to, he can walk out there and let the people of Maryland know what is going on in their government. Something that Democrats and Republican governors have hidden from us for decades. They don't want you to see how the sausage is made. Me? I think we should all know. I don't need to run for office. I've got 2 pensions and a nice consulting job right now for the federal government, where I will take a huge pay cut to be the governor of Maryland, which does not thrill that beautiful young lady in the back of the room at all. But she's willing to put up with it because this has to be done. Now, I can't do this by myself. You see on the little brochures that you've got, and the lady right here, Dr. Brenda J. Chan, my lieutenant governor running mate. Dr. Chan is an educator. She teaches special education in the Washington County Public School System. Has been doing that for 30 years. She holds a PhD in special education leadership. She also served in the Maryland General Assembly, was the first African American woman to serve in the Maryland General Assembly as a Republican in the history of the state. She is well respected in Annapolis on both sides of the aisle. And you will get a chance to meet her. She's going to spend some time down here on the shore as well. This event this evening, folks, is event number 293 since February 26th. We're in 7 different counties this week alone. We've done events, at least 4 events in every single county in Maryland, from Garrett County to Worcester, from Cecil to St. Mary's. And we'll continue to do that. Fiscal responsibility is key for a governor, and this guy has no clue as to how to do it. He ran a nonprofit making $1 million a year running a nonprofit that he ran into the ground. He's done the same thing with our Maryland. We can fix that. Where a lot of our money goes is the education system as well. And again, that's why I chose a teacher as my lieutenant governor running mate. They forced the blueprint for education down our throats over the objection of a Republican governor a few years ago to spend $30 billion additional tax dollars on our education system. Now, I'm not opposed to spending money on education, folks. And again, I'm a product of Maryland public education. I got a decent education. In a time when we spent, if you even adjust it for inflation, less per capita than we do nowadays. But the focus was on reading, writing, and arithmetic back then. Not on gender studies, or which pronoun you use, or if mommy and daddy yell at you, you call 911. If I called 911 as a child, I'd have gotten beaten by the cop. We can fix the Maryland education system. Right now, Maryland spends more than 37 other states in the nation per capita every year on education. We spend about $20,000 a kid across the state. Yet our 4th and 8th graders read and do math at below the national average on a consistent basis. That's not a good return on your investment. And right now, we are robbing our children and our grandchildren of a future. Because a Maryland high school diploma is absolutely worthless if the kid can't read it. And no Maryland business wants to hire a Maryland high school graduate if they can't do math, if they can't make change for $1. We can fix that. It's not hard. Common sense, again. You hear me say this time and time again. It's common sense. We can do better on public safety. Colin spoke of the 287G program. I've consulted and worked with Department of Homeland Security, who is my primary customer right now, quite frankly. I've worked with the 287G program for years. It's a life-saving program, quite frankly. And it only targets the worst criminal offenders of the illegal aliens in the country. Why anybody would be opposed to that is amazing to me. These are people that prey on American citizens, and more importantly for them, they also prey on the illegal immigrant community because they know they're afraid to go to the police. So you would think everybody would want these people gone. Maryland law enforcement suffered a couple of years ago when they repealed the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights in the state of Maryland. And that was not a qualified immunity law. What that did is it gave police officers the same rights when they're accused of a crime as the perps that they arrest every day. The right to counsel, the right to remain silent. Before the LEOBR, they didn't have those rights. Maryland was the first state in the Union in 1974 to pass that. 19 other states passed similar legislation since then. 2022, Maryland was the first state in the Union to repeal that. And as a result, we can't recruit and retain highly qualified officers to save our lives. And I've heard this from chiefs of police and sheriffs from throughout the state. We can fix that. We also need to better fund our firefighters and our EMS units. Now, does anyone in this room remember when Maryland passed the law that we could have a lottery here in Maryland? I do. Anybody remember where that money was supposed to go?
Education.
Education and public safety. Their ads on TV had the Maryland State Police helicopter flying across there telling you how safe we were all gonna be. Last year, the Maryland State Lottery brought in $1.6 billion, with a B, dollars worth of tax revenue. Anybody have any idea how much of that went to public schools and public safety? Zero. And these aren't my numbers, these are coming straight from the controller of the state of Maryland's website. All $1.6 billion went to the general fund. You remember when we passed the law to have casinos here in Maryland? Where was that money supposed to go? Public schools and public safety. $841 million last year. All of it to the general fund. Not one dime to public schools or public safety. Cannabis revenue. Love it, hate it, doesn't matter. It's Maryland law. $41 million last year. All to the general fund. The law says that money's supposed to go to public schools and public safety. But our legislators and our governor allowed that money to go where it wasn't supposed to go. Now, who's responsible for that? I squarely blame the governor. Why? Because the governor is responsible for writing the budget. And he is the final say when he signs the budget. That money will be reprogrammed, and there is more than enough money left for public schools and public safety. I've heard from volunteer fire companies across the state horror stories about the fact of their lack of funding. Out in Westernport, in Allegheny County, you may remember they had some flooding out there back in May. I was out there helping with the relief efforts. The chief of their fire department told me that now their ambulance crew services West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. A 200 square mile area. They're the only ambulance there. Their ambulance doesn't have air conditioning, or didn't have air conditioning. Can you imagine that? I asked him, I said, in Maryland summers, how do you run calls? He said, very fast with the windows down. He was serious. Why? Because they couldn't get money from the state, according to him. Fortunately, we have contacts with some automotive companies out there who volunteered to replace their air conditioning system in their ambulance free of charge. So we made that happen for them. Now, I'm not the governor. Now, the governor was out there the week before I went. They told him the same thing. He smiled, did his photo op, got back in the car, and went home. In his air-conditioned car. EMS guys out in Western Maryland, out in Allegheny County, or I'm sorry, out in Garrett County, told me during a meet and greet out there that their EMS guys actually pay out of pocket to restock the ambulances after every call because they don't have money. Marylanders are going to die as a result of this. This is mismanagement of your tax money. Your money, right there. You can fix this. Juvenile crime is a huge epidemic here in the state of Maryland as well. I hear this every day. I was in Baltimore City on Sunday. We were doing a community cleanup in the Penn North neighborhood. Now, you may have heard about Penn North. That's where all the opioid overdoses have been happening. The biggest complaint those people had about public safety up there was the lack of enforcement on juvenile crime. These are people that are literally watching their neighbors drop dead in the streets. They're blaming that on juvenile crime. Why? Because our General Assembly loosened up the rules, and we have a governor who put somebody in place running the juvenile justice system for the state of Maryland who just didn't care. And as a result, you wind up with kids like the one in Baltimore City who carjacked a 13-year-old, that carjacked at gunpoint an 80-year-old woman, throwing her out of her car for the 13th time. This kid was still on the street. You can fix that. Common sense approaches. Now, I can't do this by myself. Taking back the governor's mansion, and we will, because believe me, One thing that this governor is doing for us, he is a gift from God when it comes to, from a political standpoint. Because the man has not made a proper decision since he's been in office, and I don't see that changing. So when we take office in about 13 months from now, actually we take office in January of 27, but once we're elected about 13 months from now, we'll start working on this, but taking back the governor's mansion by itself does nothing for you. And it does nothing for Maryland. We have to supplement that with increasing the Republican minority right now in the state legislature. And we're working across the state, recruiting good candidates for state delegates and state senate seats, and we're working all across the state with them. I work very closely with our Republican delegation in Annapolis, and I run these plans by them. They think they're doable. Now, we're not going to fix Maryland overnight. Like I said, it didn't get screwed up overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight. I would love to stand here and tell you I have a magic wand in my pocket and I can wave it and everything will be fine and, you know, sunshine and roses, day one as governor. But then I'd be a politician. It's going to take time. But we can put Maryland on the right course. We can account for your money. We can exercise fiscal restraint and fiscal responsibility. We can bring businesses back to Maryland. Our Maryland business tax structure is ridiculous. We're charging businesses 8.5% is the corporate tax rate right now. No wonder businesses don't want to locate in Maryland. Anybody hear of the McCormick Spice Company? Old Bay Seasoning? Ring a bell? Last year during the legislative session, they threatened to move their entire operation to Virginia because they're being taxed out of Maryland. They've been in Baltimore for 141 years. And as a Marylander, everything we've talked about offends me greatly. Nothing offends me more than thinking that Old Bay seasoning is going to be made in Virginia. We put Old Bay on Old Bay here. I mean, you know, ice cream. Some people do, I don't.
Not a bad idea.
That's pretty yummy.
Thinking the same.
But we can
Later.
bring businesses back to Maryland. We can change some of these screwy leftist policies that you see in Annapolis that are directly responsible for the cost of living here. According to PJM, the company that oversees the electric grid for the entire East Coast, Maryland's electricity costs have gone up 1,012% since Westmore took office. 1,012%. And they attribute that directly to his green energy policies. Now folks, I'm not anti-environment. This is Maryland. We have the bay, the ocean, not too far from here, the mountains. We need to protect Maryland's environment. But we can't do that on the backs of Marylanders with technology that's not ripe to do that. We're down to 2 fossil fuel burning electric generation plants in this state, in the entire state. Wind and solar ain't gonna cut it. You couldn't cover enough of Maryland, actually, if you covered all of Maryland. In solar panels, you still wouldn't generate enough electricity for Maryland's needs. And that's coming from science, not me. Wind, the stuff off of Ocean City, I want to see that gone. That's an abomination, and it's damaging our environment, and it's damaging Maryland resources. And the electricity wasn't going to go to Maryland anyway. It was going to Delaware. We will do better. You will have a governor who can work with the federal government. There's a novel concept. You've got a governor right now who came back from meetings in Washington, D.C. in January and said that he cannot work with this president. Maryland's largest employer is the federal government. When Donald Trump took office, 320,000 Marylanders got their jobs from the federal government. It's now down to 275,000. We're hemorrhaging jobs. We lost the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the people that make our money. They were supposed to move from Washington, D.C. to Beltsville, Maryland. That was a $1.9 billion project, canceled. The FBI headquarters was supposed to move about 5 minutes from my house in Greenbelt, Maryland. 29,000 jobs, tens of billions of tax dollars. Gone. Why? Because who's going to put a federal law enforcement agency smack in the middle of a sanctuary county that won't work with federal law enforcement officers? So now you're staying in Washington. NIH, National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. They lost 20,000 jobs. And the hits just keep coming. Now, if your largest employer is someone that you don't like and you're the governor, you swallow your pride and work with it. That's your job. And if you can't, step aside and let someone who can do it. Because Marylanders are hurting because of it. We can fix these problems. We were talking about energy. Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant across the bay. Clean energy. Nuclear is clean energy. You know, environmentalists are screaming all the time about clean energy. Nuclear is clean energy. They've been trying to expand their reactor capacity since 2007. They can't get a governor willing to go down to Washington and lobby on their behalf with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to get the permits signed. I happen to know a lot of those folks at the NRC. Some of them who signed those permits started their careers as money interns. Maybe we can get a couple of signatures. Just saying. We've also talked to a company out in Montgomery County who does micronuclear technology. And they are telling me that they can put 5 micronuclear reactors scattered throughout Maryland that are safe, very safe equipment, and turn Maryland into an energy producer from an energy consumer. And they can do it in as little as 2 years. They also tell me they've been talking with the Moore administration for the past 2.5 years about doing that. Going nowhere. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of opening my BGE bill over there where we live with a bottle of Maalox and a bottle of Scotch on the table. I'm wondering which one I'm going to have to take a drink from. Usually it's both. We can fix these problems, folks. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It takes common sense. It takes a governor who's not looking to use this job as a stepping stone for something bigger and better, like our last 3 governors did. I have no political aspirations beyond this. Quite frankly, if you'd have asked me a year ago, if you'd have said a year ago that I'd be standing here talking to you about running for governor, I'd have sent you for a drug test. There is no way I was going to do this. No. But you have 2 choices as a Marylander. You can either stand up for your state and do the right thing, or you can be part of the problem. And I was raised better than that. I was raised in a household of public service. I was taught to run towards the fight, not away from it. And I can no longer sit back on the sidelines and expect things to change without doing something about it. That's why we're here. That's why Brenda is running as my lieutenant governor. That's why my wife is putting up with me dragging her all over the state every single night. And every weekend. All it takes is common sense, some decent judgment, and some effort. Those little brochures that you were given or that were on the chairs when you came in, they outline some of our policies briefly. Basically, it's this thing and then the back. The QR code on the back takes you to our website. On our website, every one of our policies and our ideas for how to fix them are excruciatingly laid out there for your reading at your convenience. There's also a comment box on that website for you to ask questions. Those comments come directly to my personal email address. They don't go to the staff, they come to me. Because if you as a Maryland voter take your time to ask a question of somebody asking for your vote, don't you deserve an answer from the person asking for your vote? I think you do. And I answer every single one of them. The phone number that's on our website too, much to my wife's dismay and much to my campaign manager's dismay, is this cell phone. It's not a campaign number. It's my cell phone number. Same reason. And believe me, people have tried, tested that out. I've gotten calls at 2:30 in the morning from people just to see if the number was real. And usually a half hour to 45 minutes later, we're done with the conversation. Because, well, now that I got you and you're awake, this is what I have a problem with.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, duh.
Anybody call the governor's office in here anytime? For anything? Little clue. If you call the governor's office, you don't get to talk to a human being. You get a voicemail. Every single time. You get a voicemail. And you get to leave a message. Now, I've done, as I said, nearly 300 events in all 24 Maryland jurisdictions. I've talked one-on-one with about 100,000 Marylanders at this point. I've yet to talk to one who's gotten called back. That ends day one of our administration. You will talk to a human being when you call the governor's office. They will direct you to somebody who can help you with the issue. And if that's the lieutenant governor, you will talk with Brenda Chan. If that is the governor, you will talk to me. Because we work for you. Something those people in Annapolis forgot decades ago. It's time we made them remember. It's time you got your tax dollars worth, because Maryland deserves better. Now, I appreciate your time this evening. I appreciate you coming out. Clearly, you are concerned citizens. I invite you and I challenge you. The next time they have a meeting, when you come out for the meeting, drag someone with you. A friend, a neighbor, a relative, somebody from church, a coworker. Let them learn what you know. Because the only way we are going to fix Maryland and bring it back to a Maryland we all can be proud of is if people understand that you need public servants in those elected offices. And that right now, the only way to do that is the Republican Party of the state of Maryland. You've got great people running across the state. You've got great people running down the Eastern Shore here. Support them. Help them. Campaign for them. This is your state. Take it back. Because quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we need a governor who remembers that the state doesn't end at the Bay Bridge or at South Mountain. I'm standing here, this is my 14th time to Wycomico County since February. I was here for the fair, spent a couple of days down here for the fair, nearly got killed at the fair, or after the fair. Different story, we'll save that for another time. The bottom line here is, I will never forget who I work for. I have never forgotten who I work for as a public servant my entire adult life. And that's not going to end. This won't be the last time you see me, even after the election. Once I'm governor, how do you learn what the problems in a community are if you don't bother to come out to them? The only time you see the governor over here is when there's a convention in Ocean City they want to talk back. When was the last time you saw him walk in a neighborhood? I walked Penn North on Sunday in Baltimore City without a security detail down there.
Just those angels.
Unlike our governor. Maryland deserves better. You deserve better. We intend to give that to you as your next governor and lieutenant governor. And I'll take your questions, but I thank you very much for your time and attention.